Hello and welcome back. In this Black Excellist presentation, we will highlight Charles Spaulding.
Welcome to blackexcellist.com, the site where we share Black excellence, opulence, and affluence. Our mission is to inspire you as we enlighten you.
Charles Clinton Spaulding led the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company from 1900 to 1952, a span during which North Carolina Mutual was the largest business owned by African Americans. Known during his life as Mr. Negro Business, Spaulding was largely responsible for the success of North Carolina Mutual, a firm that made Durham known as the Black Wall Street. In this original Black Excellist video, we will be featuring Charles Spaulding. So without further ado, let's get started. Number 1. Charles Clinton Spaulding was born on August 1, 1874. Charles Clinton Spaulding was born in Farmers Union on a farm near Whiteville, North Carolina, in southeastern North Carolina. He was one of 10 children. His parents were Benjamin Max Spaulding and Margaret Ann Virginia Moore, who acquired land and a mill and became skilled farmers and successful blacksmiths in the small, close-knit community. With their extended families, the couple helped establish the free, independent, and self-sustaining community of free Negro landholders, with a school and a church prior to the U.S. Civil War. The family oral tradition holds that his great-grandfather, an emancipated house servant from Wilmington, migrated west in the early 1800s to Columbus County, where he joined other free Negro and Indian farmers. Both of Spaulding's parents were third-generation members of this distinctive settlement. His father was not only a successful farmer and entrepreneur, but Benjamin also served as the sheriff of Columbus County during the Reconstruction period, right after the Civil War. Charles would admit later in his life that his father's high-spirited diligence furnished him with an example to emulate, and that all he had to do was follow the pattern that he developed. Number 2. Spaulding left his little town for better opportunities in Durham, North Carolina. Young Charles grew up in an environment centered around religion and hard work. His father, Benjamin, assigned duties and chores to all of his children at a young age. Charles rose early every morning and worked during most of his waking hours. Charles did attend school, but the educational possibilities were very limited in his community in Columbus County. And as the second oldest son, Charles' work at home on the farm took precedence over his attendance at the local school. Therefore, his education was delayed and suffered. In 1894, when Spaulding was 20 years old, he moved to Durham, North Carolina to further his education under the care of his uncle, Dr. Aaron McDuffie Moore, a physician, philanthropist, and philosopher. Charles would enroll at Whitted School and earned his high school diploma in 1898 at the age of 23. While still attending school, Charles worked at a succession of what was then considered Negro jobs: dishwasher, waiter, bellhop, and office boy. Later, in 1898, he became the manager of an all-black cooperative grocery store. After the store owners became discouraged about its prospects, they sold their interest in the store in 1899, causing it to collapse and leaving Spaulding $300 in debt. Number 3. Spaulding was hired part-time to work at NC Mutual Life. In 1898, 7 black entrepreneurs, including the uncle that Spaulding lived with, Dr. Aaron Moore, and his friend and prominent barber, John Merrick, found the North Carolina Mutual and Provident Association. North Carolina Mutual specialized in industrial insurance, which was basically burial insurance. The company hired salesmen whose main job was to collect small payments of about 10 cents to cover the insured person for the next week. If the insured perished while insured, the company immediately paid benefits of about $100. This covered the cost of a suitable funeral, which was a high prestige item in the black community. Because the 7 founders of North Carolina Mutual had other successful careers, none of them had time to run the new company, so they hired Spaulding part-time to sell policies. His supportive uncle and the other owners noticed Spaulding's managerial gifts while he was head of the grocery store. 2 of Durham's influential leaders and entrepreneurs were impressed with Charles' zeal and determination. Number 4. Spaulding benefited tremendously from the mentorship of Merrick and Moore. Under the leadership of businessmen John Merrick and his uncle Dr. Moore, C.C. Spaulding developed into a fascinating young man. Their mentorship, along with the thriving socio-economic climate of Durham, provided Charles with unlimited potential, boundless energy, and a wealth of business knowledge. Spaulding represented the younger generation of their incredible trifecta. Merrick, the only ex-slave, retained a differential antebellum manner in dealing with Durham's white business leaders. A shrewd businessman with 6 successful segregated barbershops and prosperous portfolio of real estate holdings, Merrick was the accomplished businessman, and it didn't hurt that he had access to white bankers and their capital. Spaulding would pick up the social and entrepreneurial skills, keenness, and acumen to reach the pinnacle of his business success. Dr. Moore, his uncle, was more of a Renaissance man who was devoted to medicine, philosophy, and philanthropy. Moore was also deeply religious and held steadfast to a lifelong commitment to his church, White Rock Baptist. Spaulding's irrepressible optimism and unwavering tenacity converged with their positive traits to help him drive towards both personal and professional success. Along with his father's work ethics on the farm, Spaulding picked up Merrick's business savvy as well as his uncle's sense of religion, mission, and racial commitment. Number 5. Spaulding would be promoted to general manager and other executive positions. NC Mutual Life Insurance Company, as it would become, was on the brink of failure when Spaulding became general manager in 1900. However, by 1910, the company boasted of being the world's largest Negro business, and Spaulding, his uncle Dr. Moore, and Mr. Merrick were heralded in the African American community as the triumvirate, the epitome of Booker T. Washington's black captains of industry. Durham, in turn, became known as the capital of the black middle class. C.C. Spaulding would go on to simultaneously recruit and inspire a new group of part-time agents across North Carolina, usually school teachers and ministers, quickly expanding North Carolina Mutual's operations. Soon thereafter, Spaulding hired his first full-time agents and 3 full-time clerks, rented more office space, and bought a typewriter and a safe. He started a monthly company newspaper reporting news of the black community alongside personal testimonies from satisfied policyholders as to the value of insurance. In 1904, the company began selling policies in South Carolina and other states. By 1908, the firm had 100,000 clients. The company continued to prosper, establishing subsidiaries and supporting a variety of local businesses. Spaulding was elevated to vice president in 1908 and then to secretary-treasurer in 1919 when the firm officially changed its name to the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company. By 1920, the company had over 1,000 employees and several offices along the East Coast. Number 6. Spaulding succeeded to president of NC Mutual Insurance in 1923. By the late 1920s, Spaulding had achieved national prominence, earned National Business Awards, and joined President Herbert Hoover's Federal Relief Committee. Like other insurance companies, North Carolina Mutual suffered a series of setbacks during the Great Depression, but Spaulding restructured the company as needed by trimming expenses and reducing the size of the firm's staff. In a letter to W.E.B. Du Bois, Spaulding asserted that the Depression would cultivate a generation of superior business managers by forcing them to operate businesses more efficiently. Spaulding was an early proponent of saturation advertising, inundating local businesses with promotional items bearing his company's name and putting the North Carolina Mutual name on everything, from calendars to medical thermometers. With his shrewd advertising strategy, the company continued to grow through the next decade. In 1919, Merrick died, and the board of North Carolina Mutual elected Spaulding secretary-treasurer. He used the newly obtained influence and new role to further restructure the company, and this financial reorganization of the company assured its survival during the economic downturn of the Depression. After his uncle Aaron Moore died in 1923, Spaulding succeeded Moore as president of North Carolina Mutual, a position he would hold until his death. In the meantime, North Carolina Mutual continued to grow and to establish more black-operated subsidiaries in the 1920s. Number 7. C.C. Spaulding would become president of Mechanic and Farmers Bank. C.C. Spaulding served as a living embodiment of the American belief of the rags to riches story and would soon hold the distinction as America's leading Black businessman. As its chief executive, NC Mutual would brand itself as the company with a soul and a service, and eventually amassed assets of over $37 million by the time of Spaulding's death. By 1921, Charles Spaulding became a principal figure along with Merrick and Moore in other African-American business ventures, such as the Mechanics and Farmers Bank, Bankers Fire Insurance Company, and Mutual Savings and Loans Association. C.C. Spaulding would ultimately assume leadership at the Mechanics and Farmers Bank, becoming its president. Out of such business leadership, Spaulding emerged as the patriarch of Black Durham, with social and political influence extending throughout the southern region and beyond. The Mechanics and Farmers Bank in Durham would become North Carolina's oldest African-American-owned bank. The bank first operated from office space in the building of the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance before eventually settling into its own new two-story brick building on Parish Street in the heart of Durham's Black Wall Street, the name given to the hub of African-American businesses and financial services. Mechanics and Farmers became an important source of financing in the 1920s, saving more than 500 African-American farms and residences when its loan department provided $200,000 in individual loans. The bank's policy stated its intent to provide no large loans to a few profiteers, but rather conservative sums to needy farmers and laborers. Number 8. Spaulding functioned as a New South broker for Black educational institutions. As trustee of the John F. Slater Fund, C.C. Spaulding played a significant formal role in assisting Black institutions of higher education, such as Shaw University, Howard University, and North Carolina College, which would later become North Carolina Central University. Informally, he played a larger role, functioning as a New South broker for philanthropy and employment in Black institutions. A letter from him, as from Booker T. Washington a generation earlier, carried decisive influence. He regularly appeared before the North Carolina legislature on behalf of North Carolina College, and behind the scenes, he labored to correct the inequities of the Jim Crow system, sometimes holding the fear of integration as a hostage to ransom a greater share of public funding for Black educational institutions. Number 9. Spaulding was an influential figure with presidents and national organizations. In addition to his education and philanthropy endeavors, C.C. Spaulding also played key roles in the politics and race relations of North Carolina. Spaulding's formal actions often masked the underlying process of Negro politics in the New South. As a functionary in the Democratic Party and national chairman of the Urban League's Emergency Advisory Council in the 1930s, he campaigned to secure New Deal jobs for African Americans. His recommendations were very influential in President Franklin D. Roosevelt's appointments of the Black Cabinet. Although an unofficial organization, this Black Brain Trust was a group of African Americans who served as public policy advisors to President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his wife Eleanor Roosevelt. He was also appointed to North Carolina's Council on Unemployment and Relief and President Hoover's Federal Relief Committee. As president of the Urban League's National Emergency Advisory Council, Spaulding became the official interpreter of the National Recovery Administration to the Black community. Number 10. Spaulding played key political roles at both the local level as well. Spaulding turned down positions to serve at the national and international level, but it was at a less visible level in his home state of North Carolina and in the city of Durham, where his community activism was the most effective. He was served as the secretary of the North Carolina Commission on Interracial Cooperation, but felt that his own efforts were more pragmatic and successful at fostering interracial harmony. He cited some of the concrete measures of progress his efforts yielded, including the desegregation of some of the city's public facilities. His participation in the political arena charted passage between two eras of Southern politics and race relations. This passage was the one between the classic paternalism of slavery and the direct politics of looking ahead to the civil rights movement. Spaulding and his uncle, Dr. Moore, used their economic and social position to further a middle-class agenda of racial upliftment. He emphasized self-sufficiency, racial solidarity, moral betterment, and economic practicality within the African American community. Their devotion to these ideologies led them to found Lincoln Hospital, found the Durham Colored Library, and financially support the North Carolina's Colored Orphan Asylum. Number 11, Spaulding founded the DCNA and fought for civil rights. Spaulding firmly believed the best way to achieve equality and civil rights was through economic process and business success. To that end, he devoted a great deal of effort toward preserving Washington's National Negro Business League after its founder's death in 1915 and organized the National Negro Insurance Association in 1921, becoming president of both groups. Spaulding wielded wide influence in the community and emerged as the undisputed leader of the Black business world, but he also continued to be instrumental in the founding of the Durham Committee on Negro Affairs, now the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People, which was established in 1935 to address Durham's racial inequalities. As chairman of the DCNA, he engaged in voter registration efforts and convinced city officials to hire Black police officers. Spaulding preached interracial cooperation, but also urged Black unity economically and politically, and was a giant proponent of the power of the ballot. A loyal New Deal Democrat, he urged that America's liberty and justice for all could not be achieved until the African American was able to obtain equal relief and opportunity. Spaulding would co-found Durham committees on Negro affairs, whose mission was to help increase Black participation in the political system, as well as push for better schools. He also signed the Durham Manifesto in 1942 against Jim Crow, along with 56 other signers, all influential Southern Blacks who were fundamentally opposed to the principle and practice of compulsory segregation. Their statement forecast the President's Committee on Civil Rights and Desegregation in the South and U.S. as a whole. To whites, Spaulding's business success demonstrated the economic possibilities available for Blacks in the segregated New South. For Blacks, he was a symbolic role model nationwide and the leading advocate of racial progress through economic success. He became the most influential Black civic leader in his hometown of Durham, North Carolina, working with the white business establishment while promoting Black political participation to improve civil rights and economic opportunity for African Americans. Number 12, marriage, family. C.C. Spaulding's first marriage was to Fannie Jones Spaulding from Durham, North Carolina. Fannie Jones was the half-sister of his mentor and business partner, John Merrick. They were blessed with 3 sons, Charles Clinton Jr., John and Booker, and a daughter, Margaret. However, Fannie Jones passed away in 1919. Spaulding married his second wife, Charlotte Beatrice Garner, survived until 1971. Number 13, Spaulding suffered heart failure on his 78th birthday in 1952. Spaulding's optimism, industry, and thrift influenced an entire generation of African American entrepreneurs. Known during his life as Mr. Negro Business, Spaulding would spend his final years simultaneously forging ahead in business, but also remaining active in the Baptist Church, accepting honors and giving speeches, and playing a transitional role in Southern politics. When Spaulding died of heart failure on his 78th birthday in 1952, North Carolina Mutual had assets of more than $37 million and more than $179 million worth of insurance policies in force. Along with its many affiliates, including the Mechanics and Farmers Bank, the Mutual Building and Loan Association, and the Bankers Fire Insurance Company, it was the largest Black business enterprise in the world. Fittingly, his funeral was the largest in Durham's history, and the mayor proclaimed an unprecedented day of respect to his memory. Though it was widely assumed he died a millionaire, Spaulding was always an employee and never an owner of North Carolina Mutual. Thus, the value of his estate at the time of his death was just under $200,000. Number 14, Spaulding received numerous awards and accolades in his lifetime. In his lifetime, C.C. Spaulding was awarded a multitude of awards, honors, and recognitions. In 1926, he was awarded the Harmon Foundation Gold Medal for Distinguished Achievement in Business. Shaw University, Tuskegee Institute, and Atlanta University conferred honorary doctorates of law on him. Spaulding was recognized alongside John Merrick and Richard Fitzgerald as main honorees of the Sesquicentennial Honors Commission at the Durham 150 closing ceremony Company in Durham, North Carolina on November 2, 2019. The posthumous recognition was bestowed upon him for his tremendous contributions to the Bull City as an innovative leader who helped establish one of the nation's strongest African-American entrepreneurial enclaves. Number 15, Spalding leaves behind a giant legacy of entrepreneurship and service. A believer in the self-help philosophy espoused by social activist Booker T. Washington, Spalding served as a living embodiment of the American dream. His ideas were also distinctive, as they reflect some form of African management principles while echoing the African idea of cooperation and doing business for the good of Black community. Spalding also evoked a religious or spiritual dimension in his work, and some of his practices mirrored those exercised in African American churches. Thus, one can attribute him to practice of workplace spirituality before this concept was adopted in contemporary works. Spalding's work also displayed social entrepreneurship, which echoes the work of today's individuals and companies, where a focus is on how entrepreneurship can play a vital role in assisting vulnerable populations and taking on causes.
We appreciate the fact that you stayed with us until the end. Thank you for spending time with us, and don't forget to like this video. Also, make sure you subscribe so that you never miss a video. Bye for now. We will see you tomorrow.